sometimes his abode is termed. It means white island. So you can imagine if someone had an island out in the Pacific somewhere, and no one could go there unless they were specifically invited and so forth. What goes on there? You might wonder. So something like that. White, pure. White is also the color of milk, and it's the land of milk and honey. Goloka, land of cows. And milk, of course, represents the affection of the cows, the motherly love that is, in one sense, the source of life. And so, as I say, the description began there with a verse about Krishna's contemplation. And thus, the chapter about Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's appearance begins with reference, in a very brief way, to the internal reasons for his descent. A subject that has been already discussed at great length in earlier chapters in the Mangalacharna itself. There's two verses in particular from Kaviraj's Mangalacharna that deal with the inner life. One with the philosophical canvas, if you will, to the art of that Leela is drawn, as is the second verse from the diary of Swarup Damodar. That verse serves as kind of a stepping stone to jump as high as one can into the Paravyom, where God then is found, if you will, Krishna, involved in an auto-psychoanalysis, exploring himself and his purpose and so forth. So, at some length, there's chapter dedicated to that. But here in this chapter, in the context of the narrative, which he's finally beginning, after a lengthy and profound introduction of 12 chapters, again, it's referred to. And then, of course, he follows that, as we know, as we've heard in recent discussions, with some mention of the Guru Paribar, the Guru Varga of Mahaprabhu, referring in this sense to all the elders of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And so as he plays that out, he begins to speak about Advaita, and then we have the external reason for Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's descent is again referred to, which also is played out in some length in the Mangalacharna verses. The compassion of Advaita, the fact that he was the leader of the Bhaktas, and from his house was conducting Krishna Katha, discussions of Bhagavatam and the Gita, all from the devotional perspective. A happy situation in which we found Advaita unhappy for the plight of others, and so his puja, his archan, to bring Krishna to the world. And so, again, reference to the external reasons for his descent. And then various other important elders of Mahaprabhu have been introduced. Jagannath Mishra, Sachi, we talked at length about Sachi and her contribution. I think in our last discussion Haridas was mentioned, and we talked spoke something about him and his significance and how he was part of the calling of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu to the world, as Advaita did his archan on the bank of the Ganges. Haridas was, this is described later in the text, of course, was found in a cave doing Nam Bhajan and praying for the descent of Bhagavan Shri Krishna at the same time. So they're intimately related, as we heard, Advaita and Haridas. We didn't reference it, but they are the Brahma and the Shiva of Chaitanya Vaishnavism. In this verse of the 11th book of the Bhagavatam, that there's two of them that follow the verse and a half really describes the advent of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. It's followed by two verses, very beautiful verses that further describe his the nature of his appearance and so forth. So, Shiva Vrinichinutam Sharanyam Vidyartiham Prantapalapurabdhipotam Vande Mahapurushate Charana Vindam. Shiva Vrinichinutam Sharanyam. So, Shiva, Vrinichi here means Brahma. They also took shelter of him. And so this is the Dvaita. Dvaita is as we've heard, Mahavishnu, but a special avatar of Mahavishnu. And one of the ways in which he's special is the Maha is said to refer to Mahadev, Shiva, and Vishnu. So a combination of the two. So he is the Shiva, obviously. Haridas is the Brahma Haridas, and there's a lot of background to that. Taking us all the way back to the Brahma Vimohan Leela in the Bhagavad, and Brahma's challenge, if you will, of Krishna in the forest. And this is part of the price that he had to pay. He criticized he had seen Krishna at the dawn of creation. He had the darshan of Bhagavan. And there it's described in Gopal Tapani Shruti that he appeared in Gopavesh, in the dress of a Gopa. But although he was in the dress of a Gopa, he appeared nonetheless in the Gyan Mudra. The Gyan Mudra means like giving a blessing of knowledge. It's peculiar because we find Krishna more in a mood of giving knowledge in the Gita, and a different face of Krishna than we find in Vrindavan, but here the two are somewhat combined. He's giving the essence of the Bhagavatam in 4 verses, really 6 verses, 2 introductory verses, and then 4 essential verses, and they are in answer to 3 or 4 questions of Brahma. And but he's in the Gopavesh. So the idea is, of course, when he saw him later, Muyanti Atsuraya, he's difficult to understand as he is. He saw him in the Braj, as in Swami Bhagavan himself. He wasn't in the Gyan Mudra, but rather he was holding rice and yogurt like you cook in the morning and fruit in his left hand. And eating and putting food in his friends' mouths and taking food from their mouths, and they're taking food from his. This is Krishna just transitioning from the Kumar to the Pogandalila, calf herding. So this is quite bewildering to Brahma. He thought, must be an imposter. I've seen Krishna. He's not like that. He's my guru. Of course, at the time, the dawn of creation, Brahma actually requested Krishna to have a relationship with him. It's there in the Bhagavatam, like a Sakha. So, in due course, in our spiritual practice, that which our chitta is influenced by, in terms of bhakti sanskars, by our association, particularly our guru. That will start to manifest, as if it's our own desire. And of course, then we have to cultivate a desire to pursue that. So in due course, Krishna showed him, you want to be my friend, this is what it's like. Here is an example. These are my friends. This is my friend Lila. And Brahma was a little astounded by that prospect. At any rate, so the idea is they made some offense to Krishna. This was his penance to take birth as a Muslim and be the Brahma of Gaur Leela. So naturally, Brahma and Shiva, they were close because Shiva also offended Krishna, and worse so in the Govardhan Leela by trying to kill his cows with madness. This is the chief of the gods. Indra means the chief of the gods, trying to kill the cows of Krishna. It just says something to us about the nature of heaven, what the people aspire for, and it can spend their whole lives very carefully following the varnashram in order to attain such a position, and the chief there can succumb to such that he would, out of envy, he would want to kill cows and Krishna's cows and the inhabitants of Vrindavan. So it's described that when Shiva made his, when Indra, I should have, somehow I got into Indra. It's not Indra, so forgive me. But anyway, to finish that story, Indra consulted with Brahma. What is how to make up for my offense? Brahma said, I don't know, I offended him also. Not as bad as you did. Surabi helped him out, but I got distracted, but not entirely, because the point is, Muyanti Atsuraya. The gods are bewildered. This is another example of how the gods have a difficult time for understanding Krishna. Piety, it implies, material piety, the moral life, as perfect as one can be in the moral life to attain a position of a Brahma or an Indra. In and of itself gets us nowhere in terms of understanding Prajamananda and Krishna. This is the lesson of such stories, among others. So this is a continual, ongoing, in so many ways, message of the Bhagavatam. What is Vaishnava Dharma? What is Bhakti? And what is ordinary Dharma? And how the form across the board, cross-culturally. The difference, in one sense, in Hinduism is that you have a strong emphasis on the moral law as the concern. It enables one to live within in contemplative life and so on and so forth. But it's so rare. It's so rare to be a sadhu, to be a mystic, in the real sense of the term. And there are many imitations. Therefore the Gita, Krishna says, Mityachara suchate, better to do your work. And he who lights no fire, performs no work, is what kind of a sannyasi. He says, he emphasized this point in Gita, better to work in accordance to the Dharma with detachment from the fruits, which will bring the ingress of knowledge, than to sit in contemplative life. The idea is prematurely, and the idea is that this is not easy. It's easy to imitate. And when this is imitated, everything is lost. Then your spiritual exam, it's difficult to think that we will. And it's a rare achievement. Manusyanam sahasreshu kascha ditadisideya. Tatatam api siddhanam kaschin mahaviti. It's a 1 in a million. Muktanam api siddhanam narayana parayana. Again in Bhagavatam, Gita Bhagavatam, similar verses. Very rare. But it's very, 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 very rare. To, from within the Dharma marg, come to Gyan and actually become a real Jnani and a Mukta. However, it is built in to the moral life. So you have Dharma, Artha, Kama, and quietly you have Moksha. Not something that those in the Dharma marg like to talk too much about. But it's there. And this is, I think, a difference from what we see in other traditions to some extent. Not that other traditions don't have their, like the Christian tradition has mystics. The Sufis could be thought of as a mystic tradition within Islam. But there seems to be some opposition to the mysticism. The call of mysticism on the part of the Jesus, for example, or before to the Christian public largely. I tell the story how I was in Crete, and she was actually a Catholic and used to be a Catholic nun. It's a long story, but they're both educated intellectuals and of course religiously curious, and so they would see the devotees in their dress and so forth, and so she wandered over and started listening to my lectures, and she was very attracted. to the lectures. We became close. And then she would go home and she would say, he's saying this. And then her husband started to factor in these essential kind of spiritual sensibilities into his life. And the congregation revolted, and they had him sent to the Bahamas. It's not the ultimate good, it's a shadow of the good. Sufis are like hated by many of the Islamic people, and for some reasons, because although there are mystics in there, they're also imitations of mystics, and they do things that, from an Islamic point of view, are immoral. In some cases. So at any rate, this is one thing: the moral life, good, and the ultimate good. The I, the I am, that is important. That shouldn't be too hard to digest. Of course, the I am is mixed up and confused with the conventional sense of I, and that's the problem. But here comes the advocacy of the Bhagavatam. What does Krishna say? In the beginning of the 9th chapter of the Gita, he says, Raja Vijay Rajaguyam, Pavitram Idam Uttamam, Pratyaksha Dharmam Susukam Kartam Avayam. He says, I'm going to give you the highest knowledge, and it's religious. We just said that the religious life and the life of knowledge are somewhat at odds with one another. One is supposed to lead to the other, but having attained knowledge, inner wisdom, one transcends the religious life, the moral life. So, in the moral life, there's a lack of knowledge. In the life of the contemplative, there's no necessity for the moral life. And for all intents and purposes, he or she is not interacting with the world and so on. So, but here you have the highest knowledge, which, of course, if we read the chapter, the 9th chapter of the Gita, is bhakti, and it's religious. So it's a super religious activity. In other words, it has the kind of same structure as religious life. It's active in that sense. Love is active. In love we have in love we have action and knowledge both. In the karma mark we have action, and there's not any love there, so to speak, or very little. Only through the measure that we sacrifice to get a thing. A little bit of sacrifice that we do, there's a little bit of love, a little bit of giving. In other words, things that don't endure in the pursuit of enduring life, happiness. So, knowledge is absent. And then whether knowledge is present, then the action in the Dharma marg ceases. But there's not necessarily a lot of love there. There's no taking that we find in the karma marg, but there's no giving either, so to speak. Some giving, maybe, some welfare for the people, some sharing of knowledge, but in bhakti both these things are fully operative, because in love there's action and there's knowledge. In bhakti there's a kind of love is a kind of knowing, essential knowing. So the Bhagavatam, this is a revolutionary text. After all, the story is that Vyasa, after compiling all the texts, was chastised by Narad, because in the text he emphasizes dharma and karma and jnana, and not bhakti in no uncertain terms, clearly, as to make the point that this is what all the texts are really pointing to. So he says, you've done it by all of the work you've done in your writing and editing, compiling, and so forth. Vyasa means the compiler, the composer. You've done a disservice to the society. So the Bhagavatam is meant to make up for that disservice to the society. And so this is its whole thrust, right? Entire thrust. That there's a parodharma. And it's beyond action what you can acquire beyond what you can acquire by knowledge unto itself. And as such, it's a veritable New Testament to the Upanishads and the Veda, other Puranas and so forth. And the laws are superseded by love. And so it's difficult, and the Bhagavatam starts out difficult to understand what is bhakti, and that includes the knowledge of who the object of bhakti is. So the first stanza of the Bhagavatam tells us that muyanti atsuraya, that the gods are bewildered by Krishna. They don't understand him. These are examples we give of Indra, of Brahma. And this is something about the implications, what these stories in the Bible mean. They're emphasizing a point that's spoken directly, but now in the narrative they're also being played out. These stories have an import to them. We may think we understand the import, but there's a reason the Bhagavatam keeps driving it home again and again and again and again and again. And we see that persons get involved in bhakti and they don't get the result often. And the reason is because they don't understand what they're doing. They haven't. It's not easy to understand. Therefore, nityam bhagavata sevaya. It has to be regularly heard, driven home, and from good, in good association. The import of it may be understood. So, anyway, a little bit of an aside here, but Brahma, this is his previous life coming as Haridas. And Shiva, of course, Shiva has his own encounters with Krishna, also some in Bhagavad, some fighting with Krishna and being defeated and so on and so forth. Falls into this kind of bewilderment, if you will. So in a formal way, of course, he's not bewildered here, and Haridas is not bewildered. So it's even their offenses, if you will, they have to be taken in light of, look at the consequences. People think, boy, I wish I could get the consequence of Brahma for his offense, to take Haridas, become the Namacharya, and he's so much affectionately embraced by Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and so on. So it's good to be involved in bhakti. It's not good to make offense, but it's bad. But it appears that for the most part, in spite of that, further opportunities for bhakti will be made available to us, that whereby we may overcome the reaction of such offenses. So, Brahma, Haridas and Mahavishnu Avatar, Shiva of Gaudiya Vaishnavism, in a way, they were closely friends. In these, so we have the Brahma, the Shiva, we have the Vishnu and Chaitanya Mahaprabhu also. So, in this way, in the chapter, the reasons for Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's descent, internal and external, are given in a kind of a cryptic one verse each. The elders are introduced, and in the context of speaking about the elders and highlighting some of them, the birth of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is described. His chart, astrological chart is mentioned, highlighted the circumstances, the fact that the Rahu shaded the moon in a way of saying that this descent of the Godhead and his method to his madness, the chanting, can turn inauspiciousness into auspiciousness, because the inauspicious moment, as it was thought, was causing people to bathe in the Ganges and chant the holy name. So prior to its appearance, the holy name is being chanted, and so on and so forth. So this is what we've discussed, and there's just a few more verses, and some other of the elders of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, the Guru Varga, as they're described here, are mentioned some now of the ladies, the important ladies. This means other than Sachi, whose importance we went on into at some length. How Sachi Mata is the Jashoda of the Gaur Leela, and how she took the role even that Nanda Maharaj took in Krishna Leela, in terms of Nanda Maharaj being the one that took Krishna to Mathura. Yashoda would not agree with that and was ready to throw herself in front of the chariot as well, but Nanda Maharaj assured her he'd bring him back, and there were reasons for his going, and so on and so forth. Jagannath couldn't stay around for a second leaving of Krishna and be responsible for it, and so he opted out early, and the burden then, if you call it such, came on the shoulders of Sachi, who gave Chaitanya Mahaprabhu the world in terms of the world teacher Leela. This is the Madhya Leela, which we've heard in this chapter is the most important of the Leelas, because it shows the way in the sannyas of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So she gave him to the world. She said, all right. He put himself in her hands after taking sannyas and said, well, I'm a fool, what have I done? And she gave the verdict, what should be done. So we've already heard about her to some extent. Now some of the other important ladies are mentioned, so we'll just chant some of the beautiful verses here and see what comes to mind as we hear the names of these Vaishnavis. Srivaser Brahmani Nam Tanramalini Acharya Ratner Patni Sange Sindhurari Thaila Kai Kala Narikela Diya Puje Narigana Range. The wife of Srivas Thakur, whose name was Malini, accompanied by the wife of Chandrasekhar, otherwise known as Acharya Ratna, and other ladies came there in great happiness to worship the baby with paraphernalia such as vermilion, turmeric, oil, fused rice, bananas, and coconuts. Advaita Charja Bodhiya Jagat Pujita Arja Nam Tanra Sita Takurani Acharya Ragnapana Il Upaharan Dekite Balaga Shiromani. One day, shortly after Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's birth, Advaita Charya's wife Sita Devi, who is worshipable by the whole world, took her husband's permission and went to see the topmost child with all kinds of gifts and presentations. Suvarnir Kati Bauli Rajata Mudra Pashuri Suvaner Angada Kankandu Bahute Dibya Shankara Jatera Malavanka Svarna Mudra Nana Haragan. She brought different kinds of golden ornaments, including armlets, necklaces, anklets, and bangles for the hands. Vyagranaka Hima Yati Parta Sutra Dhori Hastapader Chatta Abharana Ropya Mudra Bahudhan. There were also tiger nails set in gold, waist decorations of silk and lace, ornaments for the hands and legs, nicely printed silken saris, and a child's garment also made from silk. Many other riches, including gold and silver coins, were also presented to the child. Dulbadanya Gorochan Haridra Kumkum Chandan Mangala Dravya Patra Bodhiya Vastrugupta Dorachatti Sangelana Dasi Chedi Vastra Lankar Petari Bodhiya. Riding on a palanquin covered with cloth and accompanied by maidservants, Sita Thakurani came to the house of Jagannath Mishra, bringing with her many auspicious articles such as fresh grass, rice paddy, gorochan, turmeric, kumkum, sandalwood, and all these presentations filled a large basket. Bhakshabhucha upahar shange loila Bahubhar Sachigrihe Huila Upanita Dekiya Balakatam Sakshat Gokulkan Vanamatra Deki Viparita. So when Sita came to the house of Sachi Devi, bringing with her many kinds of edibles, dresses, and other gifts, she was astonished to see the newborn child, for he appeared for she accepted that he was Sakshat Gokulkan, directly Krishna of Gokul. The only difference being his golden color. Swarna Anga Surnirman Suvarna Pratima Bhana Sarvanga Sulakshanamai Balake Divya Jyote Deki Poila Bahupriti Vatsal Yete Dvabila Hridai. Seeing the transcendental bodily effulgence of the child, each of his nicely decorated limbs full of auspicious signs and resembling a form of gold, Sita was very pleased. And because of her maternal affection, she felt as if her heart were melting. Durvadanya dila shiyeshe kaila bahu aishe ashishe Chirajivi how do we vai dakini sakini hoite shanka upajita chite darenam tuliya nimai. So she blessed the newborn child by placing fresh grass and paddy on his head and saying, "May he be blessed with a long life, being afraid of ghosts and witches." She gave the child the name Nimai. And she gave gifts at the proper day to Sachi and Jagannath, and in this way she was very pleased and returned to her home. So a little bit about Sita Thakurani here, and a number of verses dedicated to her. One thing we see here is that the point that's being made is that she brought many valuable things, and the implication is that he's also Vishnu, as he said, Mahavishnu, so we go to the Vishnu side of him. She was poor, he was very simply and dresses in ashes. But Vishnu is, of course, very well dressed and ornamented, and the reason is because, in one sense, Lakshmi is his wife. So this Lakshmi is the Swarup Shakti of Bhagavan. The Swarup Shakti is integral to Bhagavan. We have the three principal Shaktis of Bhagavan, the primary, intermediate, and the external, or the internal, the marginal, and the external, in Prabhupada's language, Shaktis. Maya Shakti, the external, the marginal Shakti, the Jiva, the Tasta Shakti, and the Swarup Shakti, the internal or primary Shakti. So these Shaktis are amongst them. We say in our Achintya Veda metaphysic that Krishna is one and different from the Shaktis at the same time. That said, he's more different than he is one with his Maya Shakti. And he's more one with his Swarup Shakti than he is different from it. And as far as the Tatastha Jiva goes, well, he can live in either environment. But he's more at home. Well, let's say he is at home in this Swarup Shakti environment, which is a consciousness environment. So there is a kind of integration that the Tatastha Shakti can have with the Swarup Shakti that it cannot have with the Maya Shakti. That's why, for example, although the body, the spiritual body, the Siddha Deha of the perfected devotee, who's a unit of Tatastha Shakti, Jiva Shakti, the spiritual body is constituted of Swarup Shakti. But the devotee is that body, whereas Swarup Shakti, of Tatastha Shakti. Whereas in the material environment, Achit, Asat, Nirananda, and Asat Chidananda, the Jeev, they don't mix. They don't mix. But just as the Swarup Shakti has the power to transform the Maya Shakti and spiritualize it in the form of the sadhaka deha, so, and more so, it has the power to integrate with the Jiva Shakti, which is consciousness, make ingress into the Jiva, and then the result of the Jiva's responding to this in love and bhakti is the culmination of that has a form. The love has a form, spiritual body. So the idea of you take an iron rod and you put it in the fire, rod. But still, the point is, Bhagavan emphasizes, the point is still, there's a difference. It doesn't show up in any way it's of any consequence, really. You can fully function in the spiritual world, and you integrated in with the Swarup Shakti in a way that Maya Shakti really, you can't integrate. So you can't. The Tatastha Shakti can't integrate with the Maya Shakti. You want to fall in love, you fall in love, and you become more as a result of it. You become different, a different being, and changed in that respect, but all of your potential is manifest. So, what was the point here? We got onto that.
Advaita is wealthy. That's how you started. Advaita was wealthy, and then he went to...
Right, yeah, right. So, the spiritual body is a result of this ingress of Swarup Shakti, the spiritual qualities. When it's described in the Bhagavad, in Rasamrita Sindhu, Krishna has so many qualities and the Jiva can have some of them. What's taught there is that with the ingress of bhakti, it can develop some of these qualities, the qualities that Krishna has, that Brahman doesn't have, because there's no Swarup Shakti there. This is how integrated the Swarup Shakti is with Bhagavan. Because of the Swarup Shakti, there's variety in the spiritual life. There are qualities, so on and so forth. So anyway, Mahavishnu, in a sense, Advaita, his wife is Lakshmi. Sometimes referred to as Yoga Maya, which is appropriate also for other reasons, but here, in immediate, the display of wealth that is being described here, natural wealth of the community of the time. I mean, gold and tigers' claws set in gold, and the wealth of rice, the main staple, and so forth, and spices, and so on, silk and cloth, and so forth. So the Brahmins are typically poor manifestation of Yoga Maya, who arranges the stage, so to speak, of the Leelas. Male, the maternal grandfather of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, based on the astrological chart and so on and so forth, and the significance of that is considerable, but the name by which he really became known is Nimai Pandit. Nimai, later the Pandit. Nimai, and Nimai, again, it emphasizes this point that he has the ability to turn inauspiciousness into auspiciousness. The neem tree is bitter, but it has auspicious characteristics and medicinal characteristics, and so on and so forth. We had heard earlier that Sachi had seven daughters that were died at birth. So there was concern for the child. He was born near the neem tree. The neem tree is thought to keep away evil spirits. On the psychic level, we know on a physical level it has medicinal qualities and so on and so forth. So they also projected that on the psychic level it has power. as well. And so underneath the name tree he was born, so she called him Nimai. This name stuck with him. Later we'll hear also Gaurhari, Gaurchandra. All these names came from the ladies. All these names that we always chant, all came from the elderly ladies in early Gaur, from Malini, Sita Thakurani, Sachi, and so forth. Affectionate names. So some space has been given here appropriately to Sita, a very important person in the Veda. Any questions? Yes.
In the beginning of this lecture, you mentioned Lord Brahma speaking. Brahma. The Brahma.
Not Brahma. Brahma. Yeah.
Okay. Speaking to Krishna, and in Srimad Bhagavatam, that being described in different places. And is that the same Brahma from throughout the Bhagavatam?
These are, you be careful not to overthink it.
Okay.
Brahma is a paradigmatic person. He represents the Rajaguna. He represents the upper end of piety. Said if you do 100 births of perfectly executing the Varnashram Dharma, you can become a Brahma. And then a Brahma Bhuvanap, Loka Punavardhanarjan. Even the Brahmas fall down. Of course, some of them get liberated, but there's even death on that planet is the point that Gita says. So it's not so important because you think, well, no, is that a Brahma? then when he came there, and then how could Brahma become a Haridas? Because it's still the same Brahma. Don't overthink it.
Okay.
Would be my answer to that in general. But yes, it is thought that the Brahma at the dawn of creation, who heard the Chatur Shloka, it's the same Brahma that saw Krishna. Obviously one of them did.
Yeah.
Right? And all the Brahmas at the dawn of creation hear the Bhagavatam in some universes still about what happened.
Yeah.
And Brahma took off, for a moment to become Haridas. And that happens. We find in Brihad Bhagavatamrita that Gopakumar went to the Brahmaloka. Something happened to Brahma for a short period of time, and Gopakumar became the Brahma. He was appointed as the Brahma. So Brahma checked out for a short period of time, as Mahavishnu did for a short period of time. From their perspective, in terms of their roles, universal roles, and entered into an eternal moment of Gaur Leela. Did that help with your question at all?
Yeah, clarify it.
Okay. Anything else? Okay, we stop there. Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita ki jai. Gaur Bhakta Vrinda ki jai. Gaur Premanand.